shot themselves is just absolutely incredible. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the initial stages of going through that archive and just finding what you had and what kind of condition it was in.
Yeah, you guys want to start?
Sure. Ooh, initial stages. Well, I mean, firstly, we received it in batches from the archive house in France. So they were digitizing 16mm film for us. And a lot of it hadn't been digitized before. And we received it in about 4 batches over the course of 2 to 3 months. And it was all told around 200 hours of it. Visually spectacular, all of it, and also mysterious, and no sound either. So it was 16mm that the crafts filmed that had no sound, plus thousands of Katya crafts photography. So we received still images as well. And then we had an archival producer, Nancy Marcotte, who collected all of their TV appearances and radio interviews that they did, magazine interviews. So there was that side that we received as well. So that's just, I'm setting the stage as far as the materials that we had to work with.
And then the crafts also authored 19 books as well. And so we had that as well, sort of just try to uncover more about them as we went.
Yeah, and learn more about what they were learning and what they were sharing knowledge-wise. Plus, Sara conducted around 20 or so interviews with people who had worked with the crafts or who knew them in other different capacities, and so we also had those interviews to lean on.
So you conducted those interviews, but in the movie you don't use contemporary interviews. I'm curious, did you ever consider doing that, or what was the thinking behind not using those?
Yeah, from a very early stage, we decided we wanted the crafts own archives to speak for themselves as much as possible. Of course, that was very challenging because there were so many limitations to their archive, no matter how spectacular they were. But we really wanted to situate people in the moment of the present being for Katya and Maurice as they're going through these adventures, to create that sense of wondering what's going to happen, and also to feel close to them. We really see this as a love story, and so much of love is about intimacy, and to be able to construct the moment so precisely was super important to us as we were building the story. If we were to include interviews from their loved ones, as talking heads throughout the film, that would have broken the sense of temporality that we were building, because they would have been speaking, about the past from the perspective of the future. So it was very important that we didn't use that. However, the information that they gave us was incredibly important for us. It really was able to nuance some of the materials that we were working with. Specifically when it came to their relationship, and so we wove that into the narration to make sure it was captured.
Well, I wanted to ask about the narration and the evolution of that. I mean, was the narration written before you started the movie? Was it after? Was it sort of a constant state of evolution?
That third one.
Yeah, definitely. We had a hand motion that we did on the team of just like editing, writing. Yeah. I should say that at the very, very beginning, we didn't want any narration because we wanted, again, the crafts archive to speak for itself, but we really wanted the film to be a love story, and that was a premise that was very much given to us by the crafts. There's a sentence in one of the books that Maurice wrote where he says, "For me, Katya and volcanoes, it is a love story." And so for us, that really meant like there's not just a love story, but really a love triangle structure present here. However, we needed another narrative vehicle in order to make that work because there were so many limitations in the visual record, and that's where we decided to adopt narration as kind of that conduit to telling the love story. But it was a very collaborative writing process between the 3 of us and producer Shane Boris, who's sitting right there too. But yeah, the edit with the writing was a challenge for sure, doing that side by side.
Absolutely. I mean, I think given the nature of the material itself, basically what the archive itself was comprised of was thousands and thousands of shots sort of just strung together on reels, hundreds of reels really. And so that creates such interesting limitations, but also so many different creative opportunities. But the shots, because they were shot on 16mm, are very short. And so that actually had this sort of funny thing where it's like it really made us have to be concise and like very precise as well with our words. So like, you know, sometimes when we would write out scenes, it'd be like, we have so many Google Docs of like, you know, it's just like this with all of our ideas. But then like really, you know, that's kind of like why the hand motion, because sometimes we kind of had this to start with, and then like we would go to the footage and, you know, we would sort of like see what we had there, and it would be like this, you know. So we had to like really, you know, choose very wisely, I think, in terms of the writing. And then also, we knew that we weren't interested in voice of God, you know, and, you know, just a subjective narrator that is very curious about the crafts, and so much of our experience in the process is sort of infused within the writing as well, like just a person who's wondering about them and very excited about them, and, you know, like walking through their archive as well. But also I think like the writing, because Maurice and Katya are no longer with us, we had so many questions, and we found that, you know, really like we had nothing to lose by like laying our cards on the table as far as the storytelling goes, and that just opens up more the capacity to wonder. And I think that we talked a lot about how that's who Maurice and Katya were. Like they really welcomed uncertainty and questions, and so like, you know, we look to them as our guides in that way. You know, we're like, well, you know, they were never willing to really be too sure about anything, you know, and so neither should we. Yeah.
I'm curious how the fact that the footage had no sound informs the editorial process. I mean, what are the challenges inherent in that? And were you, during the picture editing process, working on sound and thinking about what kinds of sounds were going to go in there?
Yeah, we were thinking about sound. Well, the very first instinct was to just edit visually and then deal with, you know, bring in the sounds later, work with the professional sound designers at the end. But right away, as soon as we started editing, we wanted to hear it as well. We wanted to start experimenting with what the acoustic world of the film could be. And so I think after one or two literal edits, I thought, no, I need to start hearing this. So yeah, we just gathered sound libraries that we could find online. Nowadays there are more and more libraries that you can either purchase or I think we used this one in particular that had a lot of sounds in it, but then we also went on these research rabbit holes to determine specific sounds, or like what does this volcano actually sound like? Are there any field recordings out there? And can we weave them into the film as well?
And also sometimes that research led to like even deeper, like would change the story and like deepen the story. Like Mount St. Helens was like that. Like you were going down a deep research rabbit hole on that, and like just finding so much amazing stuff. But that informed the writing. Of the film.
Yeah, with St. Helens, there was one version of that scene where we found this sonic boom that had been recorded on a Walkman on the west coast of Washington State, and it's a sonic boom, and so it's really low on the frequency spectrum. It's like barely audible, like maybe 20 hertz or something. And there was one version where it was like we called out that detail that someone had recorded the St. Helens sonic boom. But then we realized that on most speakers you can't hear it, so we dropped that detail. But we really enjoyed the research process, and again, it kind of like, again, Katya and Maurice Craft we were taking our cues from them as far as their sense of curiosity and how deep they went with their research. We sort of took a page from their book and just allowed ourselves to research as well, and it did inform the story and the picture editing.
I want to try to squeeze in a couple of audience questions if there are any.